Well, it's the first of many to come podcast with Kevin Wallace, Bishop Kevin Wallace. Let me ask you this. Who is Kevin Wallace? If we were to put it in terms and words, what would you be as a self-described person? And we're going to ask you some pretty targeted questions if you're open to that. But
okay, so I would say husband, dad, ridiculously passionate Tennessee Volunteer fan, avid, horrible golfer, hit it as far as you can point but can't putt to save my life, and a Mexican food connoisseur.
Okay. So favorite food's Mexican.
Oh, without a doubt, queso with pico de gallo and a big-as-your-face burrito from Chuy's filled with shrimp steak covered in queso, hold the hatch sauce.
Okay, so all you pastors, you got that. If he comes to your church, that's what he wants you to do.
Chuy's is going to be
so favorite college football team, you already covered that.
Without a question. It's not just favorite. It is, is there another team other than the Tennessee Volunteers?
Are they going to be any good this year?
10-2, and we're going to go to the playoffs.
That was quick.
Yeah, I've been praying about it.
So final ranking?
We're going to be in the top 5.
So what's going to happen next week in the College World Series of Baseball? By the way, the ORU Golden Eagles are there.
Shout out to Dr. Billy Wilson and the ORU. You guys are incredible. Going to I think the first time they've ever gone to a World Series.
Elite Eight, yeah.
So tonight, Tennessee plays in Hattiesville, and they're going to have to beat the Southern Miss team to get to. I think we're going to do it. I think Tony's got them in position to get back to the College World Series, and I'm always pulling for Tennessee. I think we're going to do something special there in Omaha.
Okay. Favorite NBA team now that the finals are going on?
Boston Celtics, no question about it.
No question. So you're pretty upset that Miami beat Boston?
I think that was the biggest fluke in NBA hits. I think the reffing was the worst. I mean, those guys are pitiful.
Do you yell at refs when you go to games?
I get kicked out of games.
Do you really?
100%.
Does that bother you as a pastor?
No, not at all. I just hope nobody sees me. But the reality of it is I have been kicked out. I have some great stories about ejection from the basketball games I was watching as a child. It's pretty embarrassing.
So you got ejected as a child. Do you still get ejected as an adult?
Yes, and get it from my dad, who's actually probably been ejected from softball and baseball games more than any other male person in Chattanooga history.
He was a pretty good softball player, though.
He was an amazing softball player. He was left-handed. He could hit it as far as you could point. And he's on the front page of the Chattanooga Times in 1979, and he looks like he's about to rip someone's head off, and he's getting ejected out of a game by an umpire for making the umpire made a horrible call. I wasn't even born, but I know it was horrible.
Well, let me ask you this. Who's your favorite NFL team?
Titans, without a question. Second favorite team is Dallas Cowboys.
Okay. Major League Baseball?
Braves. Bravos all the way. John Smoltz, greatest person in the history of baseball. My favorite Brave of all time, obviously, John, but I would have to say Bobby Cox should have ran for president. I think Bobby Cox would have been a great president of the United States of America.
Okay, excellent. PGA?
Yes.
Merging with the Live?
That's going to be interesting, Rich. I think that was obviously a money move, and it was obviously all about, how are we going to keep our PGA thought that would eventually fade. It didn't fade, and so I think they felt like they had to do something to protect their piece of the golf pie, so to speak, in the world. So I think they felt this merger was necessary, and Donald J. Trump called this a year and a half ago.
Yes.
And it's all about money. It really is. It's all about money. We'll see how it all turns out. I don't know if it's sustainable. But I do know that they felt like they had to make sure that they were not going to get cut out of their piece of the global golf pie. And that's why they made that partnership. It's a lot of testosterone in that conversation, and I just don't know how it's going to turn out.
So favorite golfer?
Favorite golfer is going to be Bubba. And then probably, I like Fuzzy Zeller from the old days. He was great. I like Phil. I do like Phil. Phil's a great golfer. And Tiger, he put it on the map. So
favorite golf tournament?
The Masters. Yeah. But I just got back. So this is our 20th year of pastoring. I just got back, and you were with me. So it sounds kind of weird to talk about, talk about it in third person. You were there. So we just got back from Pebble. And Pebble Beach was one of the top 3 experiences of my life, playing golf with my 2 boys. And, of course, you and Ryan, we had a great time. And I don't know, it was unbelievable. But I've been to the Masters twice on the practice round. There's no place like it.
Can I say this about you?
You can
my
say
pastor,
whatever you
my
want.
friend. I was so astoundingly proud. As you mentioned earlier, hit it as long as you were so disciplined at Pebble. You
have
hit
to
a
be.
5-wood off the tee all 3 days. You didn't pull the driver. In fact, you gave your driver to your son so that you wouldn't be tempted to hit it.
I actually did hit a driver twice and regretted both drives because I hit it a mile and a mile right. And I just took the hybrid 2-wood out and just, poked it 230 right down the center of the fairway most of the time.
That's true. I'm a witness to that. Favorite vacation spot?
The Gulf of Mexico down in Florida. It's, I don't know, Devin and I, since we got married, our first year of marriage, we would go down to Destin, and we love that area, and just always kind of feels peace down there. We experience peace down there. We got some friends down there that we go out and hang out with. So that's probably our favorite place, but we go to a number of different places.
Place you haven't been that you bucket list got to go to?
Santorini.
Okay.
And Bora Bora. Pebble Beach was one of those.
Top 10.
Yeah.
Not places, plural tense.
I could tell you all 5 of them. But Pebble Beach was one of them, and I just got back from there.
And
so
that was awesome.
That was a
because
bucket list.
Isaiah and Jeremiah were able to go.
Yeah,
and
cool.
we had such a great
It
time.
was incredible.
Favorite movie?
Don't do this to me.
Come on. Top 5.
So top 5. Goonies.
Goonies.
Remember the Titans.
Yep.
No Country for Old Men.
Never heard of it.
You never heard of that
No
movie?
Country for Old Men? Never heard of it.
It's one of the greatest movies of all time. It's a thriller about a psychotic dude trying to kill everybody, look for his money, and they.
A little violent.
Yeah, it's pretty violent. Forrest Gump and hold on, it's coming. The top 5. I'm going to have to say the first Transformer movie. I just went and saw the latest Transformer movie with my boys this past week when it came out, and while Jeremiah was in town, and it was pretty good. But that first Transformer movie was pretty special. We were actually talking about it. We missed the old Transformer.
All right,
movies.
A and B. Part A, favorite song, Christian song. And dare I ask you, is it even okay to ask you if you have a favorite secular song?
Favorite Christian song. So you have to know I have a playlist, a prayer time playlist. The song that actually is most played in my playlist, and you can see how many you play, is Alvin Slaughter, Holy Ghost Revival. It's an old song from the 80s. I listen to that at least 10 times a week. It's just what I pray to. Favorite secular song? Geez. James Taylor, Up on the Roof is a top song. I'm a James Taylor guy, but I also love what I would call 90s country. Some good songs. When I Said I Do, Randy Travis, I'm Gonna Let, Alabama. I just love some of that old country. Yeah.
Old country's good.
Yeah.
No problem with that.
No problem.
So any rock and roll, any disco, you got any of that in you? I mean, you got a little soul, so you got to have...
So a little bit of maybe some of the, and again, I'm going to say this and people are going to be like, holy cow, he listens to them. Does he not know? They say, no, I don't know the really bad stuff, but I do know Hall & Oates have some really cool songs.
Yeah.
She's Gone. What was that song they just let me listen to? I don't know. I have a vacation playlist that I'm actually working on. We're going on sabbatical for several weeks, and I have a vacation playlist with a lot of old country and what I would call clean rock.
We're going to take a break so that my mic quits falling.
I love that.
Up
actually.
and down. I can't get it to stop.
It's that right there on the top, right there.
It's new equipment, so we're trying real hard to fix it.
He keeps trying to fix the one in the...
Pastor Kevin Wallace. If not Pastor Kevin Wallace, what or who would you be vocationally?
I would have been a major league umpire.
Why?
No, I'm serious. I already had it lined up.
You've already said you got thrown out of ball games. Why would you?
Because I I get mad because I think I would have been really good at that, and I watch these guys who have no passion for it. Like, if I would have been a major league umpire, there would be no question if it was a ball or a strike. You would have heard me in the entire stadium would have heard me.
So you would have made that demonstrative of a call, and then now they go to replay.
I wouldn't have made it. I did make it. I was an umpire until I was about 18 years old, and I umpired like state championship as an 18-year-old kid because I really, really loved umpiring.
You were really good at it. Just say it. You were good at it.
I don't know if I was good at it.
You were good at it.
I don't know if I was good at it.
You thought you were good at it.
But when I ring them up, I have an actual thing where you ring them up, you point, and you pull the string, and it's over with. It's pretty incredible.
Let's change gears.
Yep.
You know, we've got this Ruach Global Network of pastors.
Sure.
I know they're dear to your heart. That's been a vision of yours for many years.
Right.
And coincide with Ruach Conference. In fact, let's start there. So this is the 10th year of the Ruach Conference. So tell us how that was birthed, that vision, how you executed that vision 10 years later. What does that look like? Give us the story of the Ruach Conference.
So I remember being a pastor. I was in Ottawa at the time. We didn't even have the inner city campus. Actually, you know what? I'm wrong about that. We had just gotten into that campus because the first year was 2013 or 14. Yes, it's 10 years. So yeah,
10,
that's right. Right.
2013.
So we had just gotten the campus. I don't know if you remember, and I'm not trying to pick a fight, but this is how it came about. There was a conference called Strange Fire.
Yes.
And that conference is essentially a gathering of anti-charismatics,
yes,
people who do not believe in the gifts. They don't believe in the outpouring. They don't believe in tongues. They don't believe in anything to do with the demonstration of God's Spirit and presence in and among the people of God. There were some real critical things that came out of that conference, and some of that was passed on to me. It grieved my heart because I thought, you know, how do we have conferences where we actually are trying to take the work of the Spirit out and tell everybody it's not happening anymore? And back at that time when that conference happened, it really grieved my heart. And it grieved me so bad one night, I was up all night praying about it. I mean, I really was. I was like, God, how can we get so, you know, anti anything to do with the Spirit of God? And I really was, it was middle of the night. I was praying. I was up all night, and I just had this overwhelming sense that we needed to have a conference that was about the Holy Spirit, that was geared toward equipping and equipping people with, strategies that God would give us for strengthening and growing the church, but also encountering the Holy Spirit in a way that the breath of God can breathe on us. So I remember, I was like, I don't want to do some neat, cool conference name. Not that I'm against that, but, everybody uses, Momentum Conference or, what. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that wasn't my heart. I wanted to be unashamedly and overtly, if advertising is the right word, I don't know if that's the right word, but I wanted people to know when they heard the name, dear God, that is like a deep spiritual thing. Ruach is not like, cool. I mean, it's like some people don't even know what it is. Right. What is Ruach? And we have the opportunity to tell them, it's the Old Testament word for the Spirit. So I felt like God touched my heart. I called you and I called Tom Madden, and you remember the story. You have had a history with sort of gathering and guiding massive conferences in America. Tom birthed Winterfest, and thousands of kids would come for Winterfest, and the only two connections I had at that time. And I called both of you and said, I want to do this. We got, I don't know if you remember, but the first year we got Jensen, and was it Reinhard Bonnke. Jim Raley. And who came and sang? Was it the Binions?
The Binions were there.
Yeah.
We had another musical guest. I don't remember who it was.
I don't remember. Oh, it was Ricardo. It was Ricardo
Sanchez.
It was Ricardo.
Yes. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So all that was birthed just out of a desire for the Spirit of God to have a place to pour into pastors. It started off, you remember, a couple hundred guys. We might have had 400 that year.
Yeah, we did.
And I just said, I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do every year. Host a conference where guys can come, be empowered, and just encounter the presence of God, but also work in a way to equip them, because I think it's actually what I want to call this, time together in this podcast is breath and bones. And that came out of a sermon that God gave me at one of the Ruach conferences, and one an amazing young man doing a great work for God down in Georgia. Pastor Ben Wark was in that conference. While I was preaching that message, God spoke to him about breath and bones, being a church of both breath and bones. So, I was preaching the sermon, but he took the steak and he made it his hamburger meat, and he come out of that with an amazing revelation about breath and bones. I actually asked him for his blessing to call this breath and bones, because I think everything we do, the mantra of it is you don't have to divorce structure and strategy from the work of the Spirit. These things are not in competition. Pastor Jim Raley calls it collide, the coming together of both structure and spirit. And we need breath and bones. We don't just need one or the other. The church of the book of Acts was a combination of both. And that's what Ruach Conference is about. It's what Ruach Network is about. How do we remain people of the Spirit, but how do we also stay on the cutting edge, doing things in a way that touches the generations that we've been called to touch, in ways that we don't change the content or the message, but that we recognize methods are totally and completely changing and evolving. And there is a way to maintain your identity, but not lose your ability to be heard. And those things are incumbent upon Spirit-filled, Spirit-empowered leaders in this generation, because we got truly Pentecostal people know how to speak the language of the kingdom in their generation. And that's what Ruach is about. It's the bones and the breath, the structure and the spirit, and bringing those things together. So that's what the conference birthed. And then out of the conference came Ruach Global Network, which is now, several hundred, over 400 now, pastors and leaders from the kingdom. So we're just humbled. We're grateful for it. And I just want to be a resource. I want to be an encourager. I want to be somebody that just, provides an opportunity, even if our church is just sort of an example or a paradigm of what not to do as much as it is what to do. What did we learn? How have we, shaped this thing and learned and made mistakes, and share that with the family on the journey. That's really what it's about.
Well, it's interesting. I think if you'll remember, I remember our first meeting when we sat down and you told me, and I just listened.
Yeah.
And I remember after listening for 15 minutes to hear your heart, I asked you the question, do you want a revival or do you want a conference? And you curveballed me. You said, I want both.
I do remember that.
You remember you said, I want to equip,
right,
and I want to encounter.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Ruach Conference encompasses more so than any other conference. I know there are a lot of equip conferences,
sure,
a lot of labs, a lot of breakouts,
sure,
a lot of, equipping tended to be back in the 90s and the early 2000s. It was all about equipping.
It was.
Then, the revivals are breaking out, especially among young people.
Sure.
The recent revivals at Asbury and college kids. And you've always been passionate about the encounter. And that's what I appreciate about it, is that you want to equip by day and encounter by night.
100%. Yeah. And, that mantra, you even helped us with that. How we got you to be a part of this team. I think God put that together. I know God put that together. We hired you to help you so that you could help us hire the right executive pastor. But you came to me and you say, you know what? You have a powerful word and you have powerful worship. What you need is a powerful week. I'll never forget that. Those three things are so vital for a church, because it's not just the massive gatherings you have on Sunday. It is also, what are you doing to kind of live out those gatherings and flesh out those powerful encounters with God? And so you will testify to this. I told you when you came on, as a person who had an incredible resume, as a businessman, as an executive pastor, I was totally humbled and excited and honored that you were coming. But I said to you, you're going to help me build the week. But what I don't want to change the DNA.
Correct.
And you remember that.
I do remember.
And you have always been so honorable of that. Even I know, at first it was like, man, this is a much more intense environment than perhaps I've ever. But what we needed was not just the spiritual intensity and passion and hunger for God. We needed the execution of structure and strategy on a daily, weekly basis, so that the church is not just a flash in the pan on Sunday, but then there's no life-giving, sort of mojo happening Monday through Saturday. And I think we've actually just entered our greatest stride as a church, developing the week. In addition to what I would pray and hope is anointed and powerful word from God and anointed and powerful worship unto God. And it's all starting to come together, and we're seeing that. And we're grateful that God's helping us to understand the breath is so necessary. But in order to build legacy and longevity and sustainability, the bones have got to be there. You cannot just have breath in a body that doesn't have bones. It's got to have structure and strategy.
Let me ask you this, because a lot of our guys pastor churches. Some are bivocational.
Sure.
Some have large churches. Some have, as large a church as we do.
Sure.
And so there's churches of 20 to 2,000.
Yeah.
We basically are covering all areas.
Right.
So, and I know the answer to this question because you and I deal with this every day, but how do you, when you came and said, help me find an executive pastor, and I laid out what I thought that looked like.
Sure.
And each day, today, this morning, I came to you with some challenges and said, this is what I think, but what do you want to do?
Right.
How do you go about entrusting somebody? Because a lot of these guys don't have executive pastors,
right?
But they might have that, the longevity.
And they don't need them yet.
No, they don't need them, but they need another voice.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you see things through two lenses, and 4 is better than 2 and 8 is better than 4,
sure.
How do you take, if I come to you with that's what I do. You say, here's what I want to do, Rich. And then I go into execution mode.
Right.
And I bring you, okay, if you do this, here are the pros and cons. This is what could happen that's good. This is what could happen that's bad.
Right.
If you go this route, this could happen and this could happen. How do you go about making decisions once all the data is presented to you? And who do you let in that inner circle that you trust enough to come to you, to speak into you and say, this is my opinion, at the end of the day, knowing that you're going to make the final word?
Man, that's a loaded question. But you know what? You said it, and it's about circles. Concentric circles, I've learned this over the 20 years of ministry. Jesus saved the world. He fed 5,000. He called and sent 70. He pulled 12 closer than the 70. He had 3 within the 12, but then he had 1 within the 3. John got close enough to lay his head on the breast of Christ. And so ministry and life, in my opinion, should be viewed and seen through concentric circles. I am not able, personally and physically and with every other kind of limitation, it is impossible for me to get close to everybody. I can't. I want to. And I love everybody. But the reality of it is when it comes, and Dean Sykes, one of our trustees, told me this 10 years ago, and he said it the entire journey. The more God entrusts you with, the greater your influence becomes, the larger the church grows, the smaller your circle gets. And I was like, how can that be? Like, I need more people in my circle, right? You don't need more people. What you need is greater wisdom in your smaller circle. And you can't just go after someone because you're desperate for a voice. That's where we get in massive trouble. You actually have to wait and pray and ask God to send people to that circle who are not just, very, very, very important, and Bishop said this many years ago, they're not just for what you're for. They're actually for you.
For you, yeah.
They're for you.
Yeah.
And what happens is sometimes we put people in our circle who are for what we are for, but they're not for us. Now, when I say for us, I'm not talking about people who are blind to your weaknesses or who are not, wouldn't hold you accountable if you were doing something egregious or ungodly. I'm talking about people who really at the end of the day care about your soul and care about you personally and care about your life. And so many times we get people in our circle who either we get yes men who say what we want to say but don't see what we need them to see. Very important. I don't just need you as our executive pastor to say what I want you to say. I need you to see what needs to be seen. And if you don't have people who will see blind spots, things you're ignorant of, things that you're even aloof to, who will bring that report to you because they care about you, then you have someone in a seat that says, you know what, I don't even care about this person. I could give a rip less, but this is my paycheck, so to speak. And that's a really horrible reason to stay. It's a really horrible reason to let you in my inner circle. I need you in my inner circle, number one, because God sent you. Number two, you have a tremendous amount of wisdom, and you have shown yourself honorable and respectful. And even when I have come in and I know I've said things or asked you to do things, sometimes you're like, you never say, I don't agree, but I know it has to challenge everything that you would do. And you can share that, or maybe I'm wrong about that, but it would probably be different than the way you would handle it. there are times when I would handle things differently, but what you brought to me caused me to second think, you know what, that's probably wisdom. There are other times when I know I heard God that it might have been different than what you would have done. But you say, look, if you heard God, that's what we're going to do. You got to have people in the seat that God sends and that are respectful, honorable, and love you. And I would say this and I'll shut up, but sometimes we want to hire an executive pastor or an associate pastor to do things we don't want to do.
That's right.
Okay? It's a horrible, horrible reason to hire an executive pastor and associate pastor. I didn't hire you to do things I don't want to do. I actually want to be a good businessman. I actually want to be brilliant. I actually want to have all that stuff going on in your brain that you have in your brain. It's not that I didn't want to. It's that I recognize my strengths and I recognize my weaknesses. I didn't hire an executive pastor to do what I'm too lazy to do. I was doing that before you got here, just not at the level you did it at, because you have an MDiv, you have a master's in business, you have a ton of wealth of knowledge from history and from experience. I hired you to do what I'm not good at doing, because if we get that person in the right place, it takes the whole organization to another level, which is what I believe has happened. So I don't know, that's a long answer, but some guys just say, I got this stuff I don't want to do. You got to get motivated and you got to go kick butt and you got to do that. But then God will send you somebody who's actually really good at it so you can focus on what you're called to do and what you're gifted at doing, which is what you've allowed me to do, is go do what God's called me to do without the pressure and all the daily yeah. So
well, and I think that's the purpose of hiring an associate or executive pastor or just a leader in the a church of 200 doesn't have the budget to do these type of things. But I think if they can entrust another voice to do some of the things, and one person said it this way: they staff to their weakness.
Yeah, lead where you're strong, staff where you're weak.
Correct.
And that's something that I've always told our sons and daughters in the ministry when they go out and do it. They're like, how do I know who to hire? Well, first of all, what are you really good at and what are you passionate about?
Right.
Don't bring somebody in that is looking to compete with you. And one of the first things you told me is, I don't need your pulpit. I'll never forget that.
I don't want it.
I don't want your pulpit. Mm-hmm. And everybody else, not everybody else, I shouldn't say it like that, but you see people who want to help you, but they have, their own personal agenda in that. And, those people, and I would never fight over the pulpit because that's overrated anyway. The pulpit it's overrated. It's the call of God on my life, and that's why I'm faithful to do it. But anybody who comes in that wants that, you have to be very careful with that, because if they're wanting to do what you're called to do, you probably didn't hire the right person, just to be honest with you.
Well, and let me say this, and then we'll move on to another topic, but there are a lot of worship leaders, youth pastors, associate pastors that are on the podcast that are watching this today. They're not the lead pastor.
Right.
The thing I do appreciate about you is that when you do come to me and say, there are two ways you approach me. My office is right across the hall from yours. Mm-hmm. One location is right next door to yours. We can actually hear each other talking through the paper-thin walls. But no, most of the time, I'll say 99% of the time, you walk in and you say, here's what I'm thinking.
Yep.
Okay? 3, maybe 4 times in 4 years, you've come to me and said, I've heard from God.
Yep.
And now how I delineate that is that when you say, here's what I'm thinking, we go into pros and cons.
Right.
We go into ifs and ands.
Right.
We go into but ifs only, all the different things. But the 2 or 3, and you know what, we talked about one last week, that when we looked at it, we said, this does not work. This is not ever going to work. What we're looking at is not correct data. But you said, I believe this is of God. Yeah. Your wife said, this is of God. Yeah. At that point in time, all bets are off.
All bets.
And if you're a second chair leader and you're looking at it from the standpoint of, if your pastor says that, and pastors don't abuse that, that's what I appreciate about you and Pastor Devin, is you don't abuse the I've heard from God line.
Right.
Faith and common sense.
Right.
Let's talk reality here. You don't abuse that line. So when you come and you say, I've heard from God, then the execution goes straight into mode. We don't say, well, here's what could happen. This might not be good. These numbers don't look right. We just say, okay,
right.
This is what's going to happen. And sometimes we look at things outside of the budget. Sometimes we look at things and say, this is ministry. It's not supposed to be a profit center.
Yeah, that's what you said in that situation.
That's what I'm saying.
That's powerful.
Yeah, well, and I think when we look at things from that way, and I would encourage the lead pastors to look for people that don't want your pulpit, number one. Number two, you don't abuse the "I've heard from God" line. Mm-hmm. You use common sense with faith, especially in budgeting.
Sure.
And we're going to talk about that in the next segment, but I think that's what I appreciate about you. You don't put me out there and say, "I've heard from God" on some whack idea that you just you'd have bad pizza last night.
Sure. No, and here's the deal. If you are floating from place to place and you're not going to have roots somewhere, then your integrity doesn't matter too much. You can bounce from place to place and tell everybody when you get to a new place, God said to do this, God said to do this. If you're going to stay somewhere long, have roots, longevity, sustainability, and keep your integrity, people remember when you said God said, and then it didn't work like you said God said it was going to work, which is why I walk in the fear of the Lord with that. Like, and there are some times where I'm not waiting on a word from God. I'm feeling this. Let's go try this.
Yeah.
Right. And, okay. But there have been in 3 or 4 years in the 4 years we've been together, there have been 3 or 4 times when I walked in and said, I heard God on this.
That's right.
I don't think any one of those situations turned out like sour or bad, because the Bible said wisdom is justified by her children, which means if the decision you make was truly godly wisdom, then the offspring of the decision you make will testify that what you said was God was indeed God. I'm not going to give God a bad name. I may give myself a bad name and stand up and say, we're going to try this. I feel like God is in this. I can't really tell. But I believe God is in this, and we're going to try it scared. And we've done that, and it's
a lot,
and it's worked.
Yes,
there's been many times it's worked. Let's be real.
Yes,
I've also a couple of times said, let's try this. I don't know that it's God, but I feel, and it just flopped. And we were like, well, that sucked. I mean, that was not what we were planning on, and it didn't happen like we were going to happen. Would I have done it all over again? 100%. Because it was in keeping with the Great Commission. It was in keeping with integrity. We didn't do anything ungodly. We were trying to advance the kingdom and be, ambitious and strong, but it just didn't work. But the times you say, God said, if I'm going to stay somewhere a while and I'm going to have integrity and I'm going to have longevity, people are going to say, oh, okay, pastor don't always say God said, but when God says, God does it. And Moses had those moments. Joshua had those moments. Moses is in the tent and God says to him, I know you told everybody to stand still, but I didn't tell you to stand still. Get your honey out there and take them across the Red Sea. And then that's when he stretches his rod out over the sea, the wind blows. Can you imagine if Moses is like, y'all follow me down here to the Red Sea, we're going to try something. And God said, we get ready to walk across, all God said is stretch your rod out. The wind starts blowing. The Ruach of God comes and they walk across. And everybody's like, oh man, Moses got it together. If you're going to say God said, you got to really know God said. And as leaders, I just think sometimes we get ourselves under so much unnecessary pressure. Because there are times when I don't know if God said it, but it feels good, so we're going to try this.
Bottom line is if we try it, and again, you didn't play the God card, but if we try it and we learn the lesson, we don't take the loss. Amen?
Exactly. And if, Maxwell said, if you fail forward.
Right. Create
an environment where even if you fail, you can fail forward. And we take good notes.
Right.
Like we take really good notes on failure, because we don't want to repeat failure. We want to use failure as leverage it for our own benefit as we move forward.